Hi, friends. I just wanted you to know that anytime you have a question that you'd like me to explore on the podcast, anything around nervous system healing, relationships, or generational patterns, you can now submit it anonymously through the link in the show notes. You don't have to share any personal information unless you choose to. There's also an option to consent to be featured in a future episode for a short audio coaching conversation. If you check that box, I or someone from my team will reach out to schedule a time that feels good for you. I'd love to hear what's on your heart. Welcome to the NeuroHeir Podcast, the show for cycle breakers, parents, young adults, and helping professionals ready to understand their nervous system through a generational lens, heal what isn't theirs to carry, and consciously choose what comes next. Hi, I'm your host, Leanna Hunt, an associate clinical mental health counselor and certified performance coach. Each week, you'll get stories, science, and somatic practices, plus my signature 4N framework: notice, name, nurture, and navigate, to help you honor resilience, break silence, and build deeper connection with yourself and those you love, all while shaping a legacy of safety, freedom, and possibility. Welcome back to the NeuroHeir Podcast. I'm your host, Leanna Hunt. As we're arriving here towards the end of January, I want to start by naming something that's super common. This is usually the point in the month where people start asking themselves questions like, why is this already harder than I thought? Why am I already slipping? Or why can't I keep the momentum I had at the beginning? And if you've been listening to the last few episodes, I want you to hear this clearly. Nothing has gone wrong. And I want you to ask a question to yourself. What if January isn't meant to prove anything about you, but instead it's meant to reveal how your nervous system actually works? In episode 13, we talked about why willpower fails, not because you're broken, but because your nervous system is running the show. And in last week's episode, we talked about baseline frequency, the familiar station that your body returns to over and over, and why sustainable change requires acclimation and not force. So today's episode is about holding on to what you've learned. How do you stay with the changes you're making without abandoning yourself, and also without intentionally burning bridges in the process? Because growth that costs you safety or connection is not growth that will ultimately last. In episode 15, we use the radio dial metaphor. That episode is really important to remember because your nervous system has a baseline frequency, a station it knows how to live in. So if you haven't listened to that, please head back there and then come back to this one. And that is when you begin doing your inner work. You might start touching a new station as your energy shifts. Maybe there's more space there and more rest. Maybe there's more honesty and more regulation. But visiting a new frequency doesn't mean your nervous system knows how to live there yet. So you visit, you come back, you visit again. That back and forth isn't failure. As we talked about last time, it's acclimation. And we also named something really important. When you change your frequency, the people around you who learned how to be with you at that baseline frequency, they don't always know what to do with you at the new frequency. Because again, as we talked about and explored or started to explore, maybe your availability shifts and your boundaries change and your energy just feels different. And this is where many other people get stuck. Not because they don't want to grow, but because growth can often start to feel lonely, maybe destabilizing or guilt-inducing. This is where this episode begins. In a lot of growth spaces, raising your frequency might be framed as being less emotional. Maybe it's being less reactive, being more disciplined, or being beyond old patterns. But here's what often gets missed. If growth requires you to silence parts of yourself, your nervous system doesn't experience that as an evolution. It can experience it as a loss. Self-abandonment doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it can look like pushing through exhaustion because, quote unquote, this is good for me. Sometimes it is trying to stay calm instead of telling the truth. Sometimes it's calling pressure discipline. Sometimes it's calling disconnection alignment. And the body knows the difference. A nervous system that feels unseen will not stabilize at a higher frequency. It might perform well for a little bit. It might push through. It might comply for a while. but it will not ultimately integrate. And without integration, change will collapse. Here's the NeuroHeir reframe I want to anchor in for you guys today. Higher frequency doesn't come from leaving parts of yourself behind. It actually comes from creating enough safety for more of yourself to come online. Your nervous system doesn't climb like a ladder, it settles. So when safety increases, breath can deepen, reactivity can soften, and presence can expand. And that's what I call frequency. This is supported by nervous system research showing that stress and threat reduce access to the parts of the brain responsible for planning, for follow through, and flexible thinking, while regulation restores that access. And as always, as I've said, I've linked the research that supports this in the show notes if you ever want to explore it more on your own. But here's the simple takeaway. If you're trying to hold a new frequency while your body still feels unsafe, your nervous system will eventually pull you back to what's familiar, because familiarity, that word is always so hard for me to say, feels safer than the unknown. Again, what's familiar feels safer than the unknown. Because when you change your frequency, you don't do it in isolation. That's something we also need to remember. As you're changing and you're growing and you're learning and you're healing, you're doing this inside your family system. You're doing this inside a partnership. You're doing this alongside friendships. You're also doing this in your workplace and other social settings and people that know you at what you've always been. And systems seek stability. So when one person shifts, the system can feel it. And this is often where guilt can show up and loneliness, that quiet pull to go back, not because you want to undo your growth, but because your nervous system is wired for connection. And at this point, people tend to swing into extremes. Sometimes it's either, I'll just go back to how I was, just kind of anything along the lines of self-abandonment, or screw it, I'm done with everybody, which can be that a relational abandonment. And the NeuroHeir path is neither of those. I want to bring us back to the New Year's Eve meditation from episode 12, where we met the warrior and the higher self. I hope you guys did this. And if not, you can always go back and find it and do this throughout the year. It's not a one-time meditation. You can use it anytime you want to. So as I had you meet the warrior and the higher self, now we're at the end of January. This is exactly when you need that inner team. Your warrior part knows how to show up. The warrior part of you protects commitment. The higher self knows how to pace. Your higher self protects integrity. And if you try to raise your frequency using only the warrior, you're just going to push. And if you try to live from the higher self, you can bypass the body. But sustainable change happens when effort is guided by wisdom and wisdom stays embodied through action. A NeuroHeir doesn't exile the warrior part to become enlightened, and they don't silence the higher self to get things done. They let both belong. Now I want to bring willpower back into this conversation because this is usually the moment people turn on themselves. In episode 13, we talked about something super important. Willpower supports long-term goals, but willpower does not get you out of a nervous system state that doesn't feel safe. And I want to say that again because this is where so many people get confused. Willpower is not a rescue tool. It is a support tool. Most definitions of willpower describe it as the ability to resist immediate impulses in order to achieve long-term goals. You'll often hear it described as, like if you Google it or go online or read some stuff about willpower, you might hear it described as self-control, self-discipline, self-regulation, and the mental strength to delay gratification. And those parts are all true. But what's also true is that willpower does help you say no to short-term urges in service of something that matters more. It does support planning, consistency, and follow-through. It does live in the part of the brain that can think long-term and weigh out future consequences. But here's the part that often gets left out. Willpower only functions well when your nervous system feels safe enough to access it, when your body believes the future won't cost your survival. So when your nervous system is in threat, when you're overwhelmed, pressured, maybe that feeling of always bracing for impact or trying to outrun exhaustion, that's the one I know so well, your body is still prioritizing survival. And in those moments, the parts of the brain responsible for long-term planning and impulse control don't have the same access. And this isn't because you're weak. It's not because you lack discipline, but it's because your body is doing its job. So if you've been trying to use willpower to stay at a new frequency your system doesn't feel safe in yet, maybe you're trying to use willpower to maintain boundaries while ignoring your own limits. Maybe you're trying to use willpower to keep showing up while you're internally feeling like you're shutting down or you're always holding your breath. Of course, it's going to collapse. And this, again, isn't a willpower failure. This is a placement issue. Willpower was being asked to do the job of regulation, and regulation needs to come first. Another thing that's important to name, and you might recognize this in yourself, is that willpower is effort-based. It takes a lot of energy, and it can be mentally taxing. And when it's overused, it can get depleted and you can get depleted. And that's why people often describe willpower as something that runs out, not because there's a part of you, again, that's broken, but because it was never meant to operate in constant threat or chronic stress. So in NeuroHeir language, this looks like safety sets the frequency. Frequency sets capacity. And capacity is what allows willpower to function and not the other way around. One more time. Safety sets the frequency. Frequency sets and helps determine capacity. And capacity is what allows that willpower to function. So instead of asking, why don't I have more willpower? A kinder and more accurate question that you can sit with would be, what would help my nervous system feel safe enough for willpower to do its job? Because when safety leads, willpower doesn't have to fight. It gets to support the life you're already building. And this is also where SMART goals come back in. We use them, and I like to use them as a nervous system support. SMART goals don't work because they're efficient. They work because they can reduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is a threat cue to the nervous system. When a goal is vague, such as, I want to be better, I want to get healthier, I want to be more aligned, remember that your nervous system doesn't know what that means because there's not an endpoint. There's no containment. There's no signal that says this is manageable or this is measurable. SMART goals create safety because specific goals tell your brain, this is what we're doing. Measurable goals tell your system, I'll know when this is complete. Achievable goals tell your body, this won't overwhelm me. Relevant goals say, this matters to me, not just who I think I should be. And time-bound goals say, this has edges, I don't have to carry it forever. And if you guys didn't figure that out, that's the acronym I just broke down of what SMART goals are. And remember that containment is safety. So when you hear me talk about SMART goals in this work, hear this. SMART goals aren't about control. They're about creating enough structure that your nervous system doesn't panic. And once your system feels safe enough to stay present, that's when willpower can actually do its job, which I think is pretty cool. So if episode 15 was about recognizing a new frequency, and today has been about understanding why force doesn't work, I want to spend the next few minutes getting very specific with you, because the real question isn't just, how do I change? It's how do I stay with the change I'm already making? And is there a way I can do that without turning on myself and also without abandoning relationships that still matter to me? Here's what I've seen again and again in my own life and in my clients' lives. Staying with change isn't about doing more. It's about how you relate to yourself and others while the change is integrating. So today I want to offer you 4 very specific NeuroHeir principles for holding change. We can also call them orienting points. Okay, so number 1, we stay with change by slowing the pace, not the intention. One of the most common mistakes people make is assuming that slowing down means backing out, and it doesn't. Remember that slowing down means letting your nervous system catch up, letting your relationships recalibrate, and letting your identity reorganize. Does that make sense? You can be deeply committed to change without demanding constant proof. In fact, one of the most regulated things you can say to yourself is, hey, self, I'm not quitting here, I'm integrating. That single reframe can help prevent self-abandonment, because instead of interpreting discomfort as failure, you are interpreting it as information. Okay, orienting point number 2. We stay with change by letting discomfort exist without making meaning. This is where bridges often get burned, because when discomfort shows up, such as guilt, maybe tension, awkwardness, disappointment, sometimes we feel like we have to rush to explain it. We tell ourselves stories like, oh my gosh, I'm hurting people, or I'm becoming selfish, I'm changing too much, or this isn't worth it. Why even try? But remember, discomfort doesn't automatically mean harm, okay? Often it just means the system is adjusting. Staying with the change means learning to say, this feels uncomfortable, and I don't need to decide what it means yet. That one pause can save a lot of unnecessary rupture. You do not have to undo your growth just because someone else is unsettled by it. And you don't have to sever connection just to protect yourself. You can let discomfort breathe. Remember that invitation idea we talked about, where as we do this work, it's like we're sending these energetic invitations to everybody in our sphere. Well, when you do your work with love and compassion, it naturally invites other people. Even if they're not on your timeline, they get to decide when they are ready. Okay, point number 3. We stay with change by communicating earlier, not louder. Burned bridges usually don't happen because of boundaries. They happen because of delayed communication. So when you override yourself for weeks or months and then finally speak up, the boundary can come out sharp. Maybe it can come out urgent or explosive, or maybe super demanding. So staying with change looks like naming shifts as they're happening. Maybe it's giving people context instead of ultimatums, or it's speaking from regulation and not a place of resentment. Practical application of this. Here's a few things. It might sound like, I'm realizing I don't have the same capacity I used to. This is what I'm available for now. Or maybe it's, hey, I'm working on not overcommitting, so I may show up differently. Can I get back to you about the details? Or I care about our relationship so much, but this is what I can commit to right now. Just know this isn't about you. It's about what my body can handle. This is honesty for you and also for them. It helps orient the energy between two people, and orientation helps nervous systems. Not only yours, it also helps theirs. And point 4, we stay with change by letting go of the need to be understood immediately. This one's pretty big, because many people abandon themselves not because the change feels wrong, but because they want reassurance right now. Maybe they want approval. Maybe it's validation. Maybe it's immediate understanding or that relational relief that comes with that other person. But real change often has a lag time. Remember, guys, people need time to adjust. Systems need time to recalibrate. And relationships need time to find a new rhythm. Staying with change sometimes means understanding that you might be misunderstood for a while, but that you can still love yourself and others you care about in the process. That is what I like to think of as mature nervous system leadership. Staying with change isn't about being perfect either, or calm, or endlessly patient. It's about staying in relationship, always with yourself first and then with others, all while your nervous system learns a new way of being. That's what prevents self-abandonment, and that's what prevents unnecessary bridge burning, in my opinion. Also, I have said this before, but it feels really important to say it again. Sometimes as we start to heal our nervous system and we realize how good it feels to feel good, how good it feels to feel more centered and more regulated, there are relationships that will not last through it. But my genuine hope and my continual prayer always is that when one person in a relationship starts doing their inner work, that their partner or the other person will accept that invitation to do their own. And unfortunately, that will not always be the case. But I also have seen that not right now also doesn't mean never. And sometimes the person you least expect to shift does. One person alone cannot save a relationship. But I truly believe, and I have seen that one person can influence a relationship. It is one of the most beautiful things when that happens, but I also know it will not be the reality for everyone. And I want you to know my heart goes out to you. It really, truly does. And before we close, I want to offer a short practice to help your nervous system hold what you're learned, what you've learned, what you're learning. Notice, just gently let your body settle for a minute. Just notice where your energy feels tuned into right now. Does it feel closer to the familiar Does it feel somewhere in between, or does it feel like it's moving? I want you just to notice. I want you now to just name what's present for you. Are you feeling hope? Are you feeling exhaustion? Are you feeling maybe calmness? Remember that naming creates space. I want you just to check into your body, place your hands somewhere that feels supportive, and just take that slow breath in through the nose. That longer breath out. And just that reminder that I am allowed to grow at a pace that feels safe. Maybe you want to imagine the warrior self and the higher self standing together with you, where there's a combination of effort and also wisdom. And lastly, navigate. Just ask yourself, what is one small action that helps me stay at a supportive frequency without feeling like I have to force anything or abandon myself? And remember, let it be small and let it feel safe. Notice how your body responds. If it softens even slightly, that can be your answer. As we close out January 2026, I want you to remember this. You don't have to raise your frequency to leave people behind. You raise it because your nervous system is ready for more. And you don't raise it by abandoning yourself. You raise it by creating enough safety to stay. And I hope you all remember that as you go throughout your week. Make it a beautiful one. Until next time. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining me on the NeuroHeir Podcast. This work is about honoring resilience in yourself and also those who came before you, all while finding freedom from what was never yours to carry. With the help of stories, science, somatic tools, and the 4 N's, notice, name, nurture, and navigate, you have a path toward deeper connection with yourself, your loved ones, and the legacy you want to pass on. If today's episode spoke to you, share it with someone who's ready to step into this work too. And follow the show so you never miss an episode. Remember, you may not have chosen what you inherited, but you can choose what comes next.